Hey everyone, Cadian Sergeant Steele here today, and I want to talk to you about our commanders for the Cadian forces. Alright, so let's talk about the Cadian Castellan, the Cadian Command Squad, and the Regimental Attaches, and what they can do for our army. All three of these are units that we can take and attach to our Cadian infantry squads, or our Kazar kit. But there are special rules for the regimental attaches, but I'll get to them in just a minute. So let's start by talking about the most flexible of these, the Cadian Castellan. So pretty typical profile here for our single character model that's not a named character. What we have is movement 6, toughness 3, 5 up save, 4 wounds, so a little resilient, leadership 7, typical, and OC 1. It also has a 5 up invuln save, and has voice of command and leader. So it can attach to units, which is really critical, and it's what this model really wants to do. And it can issue orders to one regiment unit. Now that is typically a range of 6 inches, but that can be buffed, and I'll talk about that in just a moment. So it has a plethora of weapons it can choose from, and all of these are ballistic skill 3 or weapon skill 3. We have a bolt pistol, bolt gun, las pistol, plasma pistol, chain sword, power fist, and power weapon. I have mine currently modeled with a power sword, so the power weapon, and a pistol and a holster, so I can make that to be any pistol I want while I'm playing my games. Really great, really flexible model. But what makes the Cadian Castellan stand out as the one unnamed leader, right, the non-named character for the Cadians? He has 2 unit abilities that are absolutely critical. First is Senior Officer. While this model is leading a unit, ranged weapons equipped by models in that unit have the Sustained Hits 1 ability. So he's going to allow you to procure some additional hits on those 6s. This could be really good for like large units with lots of las guns or units with special weapons that you want to try to get multiple hits through. And he's going to allow you to do that. And just to get those few extra hits in there and remember, with guard, it's weight of dice oftentimes, and that's what counts. And so getting more dice is always going to help you accomplish that. The next thing that the Cadian Castellan does is get back in the fight. So this allows a model, while it is leading a unit, that unit is eligible to shoot in a turn in which it fell back. So if you attach the Cadian Castellan to the 3 units it can be attached to as a leader, right? Shock troops, you could take up to a 20-man blob. The infantry squad, same way, or the Kazarkin, 10-man unit of Kazarkin. If they get into melee, they can fall back and then still shoot, which is really good. I mean, because that's what we want to do as guard. I mean, imagine being able to do that as Kazarkin and having a Cadian Castellan in the unit. That can be really beneficial. And with your special weapons with your Kazarkin, right? You're using meltas, plasmas, your sniper rifle, your hotshot las guns even, getting sustained hits 1 could be really beneficial. So this is truly a multiplier, a true synergistic amplifier for our Cadian armies. But don't forget, it can also attach to infantry squads. So that's important in case you do want to run and have more flexibility, say taking heavy weapons teams in your units. You'll be able to do that with infantry squad. Overall wonderful unit, but he can be buffed by the Cadian Command Squad. So let's talk about that. Now, less flexibility with the Cadian Command Squad. Let's talk about his profile real quick. We have still movement 6, toughness 3, 5 up save, 3 wounds on the commander, and then 1 wound on all the others. So only multiple wounds on this one model here, and everyone else dies kind of quickly. They have leadership 7 and OC 1. Pretty typical. When you look at your weapons, this actually gets to be a more complicated kit than you would expect. So you can take flamers, grenade launchers, las guns, las pistols, melta guns, plasma guns, chainsword, close combat weapons, power fist, and power weapons. Currently have my leader modeled with a chainsword and a las pistol. You can switch out the standard bearer for one of the special weapons like a flamer, melta, plasma gun, and so forth. Your sergeant is also pretty flexible, and you can switch out because he has the chainsword, so that can become a special weapon as well, which is really cool. So I think the way I'm reading the card, you can take 2 special weapons. You could have 2 meltas or 2 plasmas in your unit, which is really great to be able to have that kind of flexibility. Then we also have, I've got mine with the standard loadout, the regimental banner, and I have a chainsword and a pistol on my sergeant here. My veteran sergeant is what I'm calling him. Then we have the Master Voxcaster, which is really critical in what buffs the Cadian Castellan, and a medic. So let's talk about the medic. It gives you a 6-up feel no pain. Really wonderful. Now that's to the unit. So when you attach the command squad, say to a 20-man unit of Cadian shock troops, that unit now gets to ignore wounds on a 6-up. That can really help keep your troops around. I know it's only it's a 16% chance, but every wound matters. And when you have 25 to 29, maybe even more wounds available in that unit, depending on how you do all your attach, leaders to them, that gives you a lot more wiggle room and a lot of ability to withstand getting pummeled into the ground. Now, the regimental banner gives you +1 to objective control for models in that unit. So that takes your Cadian shock troops from a 2 OC to a 3 OC. Now, also remember, this is what's critical about this. The way the rules are currently written, when you modify your characteristics, if you reduce a characteristic to 0, then you add any pluses or minuses. So if somebody reduces your OC to 0 or something else in the game does that, this allows you to pop back up to a 1. You can't beat that. That allows your army to continue to be in the game, say even if they get battle shocked, right? That allows you to still be able to control objectives and to keep moving forward. Then, what I think is probably the greatest model in the Cadian Command Squad unit is the Master Vox. Now, why is that so? Because when you have a Master Vox, what that allows you to do is your third war gear option that you can take. It allows each time an officer in the bearer's unit, so that's this model starting with, but if you also attach the Cadian Castellan, because you can do 2 attached leaders in the guard, it's a special rule we have, those officers can issue orders to an eligible unit up to 24 inches away. That's on these new smaller tables. Say you're not playing the 4x6s and you're actually playing the smaller 44x60s. That's a huge distance. When you think about that, that's a radius, right? From the officer, 24 inches. So that's a 48-inch circle. Actually, even bigger because the radius of the base from your officers. And that's just an officer in the unit. So that also means maybe your Castellan's way up front, maybe your command squad's way in the back, and that gives you even more range depending on how you're positioning those models and moving them about. So then, this is the other thing I'm going to recommend. You take the Grand Strategist enhancement for your Cadian Castellan. So it can issue 1 additional order, 1 additional regimental order. Now you have 1, 2, 3 orders at 24-inch range leading your army. That's phenomenal. That's 3 field ordnance batteries getting orders. That's 3 blobs of infantry getting orders. That's 3 squads of sentinels getting orders. At a long distance, too, you could still protect this unit, keep them hidden, and issuing those orders all over the board and keeping them safe. I highly recommend to pair your Cadian Castellan with your Cadian Command Squads and put them with the Cadian Shock Troops unit. Remember, Cadian Command Squad can only go with Cadian Shock Troops. It's not as flexible as the Castellan, but if you want to be able to do that and get that 24-inch order range, this is what you do. Now, you may also say, well, you may not want to run the Castellan with your Kazakh because they can already issue themselves an order, but this can give you an extra order just in case you think you need that. You could get +1 to hit and get additional cover save. So, right, adding that flexibility in there can be important, and getting the ability to fall back and shoot can be important. And also being able to modify the different weapon options on infantry squad could also be good. So keep that in mind. This may be the reason why you want to run the Castellan separate, but I prefer running Cadian Shock Troops because obviously I'm Cadian Sergeant Steel, and so this is the way I like to do it, by pairing them both together, attaching them to a unit. But then, we're not done yet. Let's talk about unit abilities. So for the Cadian Command Squad, which has the leader ability and can attach, it also has voice of command, one order to a regiment unit. It also gets Cadia stands. So what that rule does is while this unit contains a Cadian officer, so this one, you can ignore any or all modifiers to characteristics of models in this unit. And to any roll or test made for models in this unit, excluding modifiers to saving throws. So literally, if this is attached to your Cadian shock troops, you can ignore all negative modifiers. Let me say that one more time. Nobody is punishing your ballistic skill, your leadership, or any other tasks, roles, or characteristics that you have. You can just ignore them. That is huge. Now, I think the way I'm reading that too is that would ignore potentially battle shock, right? Because that changes your characteristic. And it doesn't say like from your opponent or anything like that. You just get to ignore any and all modifiers to characteristics of models in this unit. But this is important just to keep in mind. So if your opponent says, oh, I have stealth, I am -1 to hit, you go, I don't really care. I'm going to shoot you with 18 las guns, not counting the command squad's las guns, and blow you off the table. I'm still going to hit on 4s, maybe even 3s if I gave them take aim order. Because you can still give your positive modifiers and choose to ignore the negatives. That is super flexible and super awesome, making this one of the best units in the Guard Codex. Now, Sentinels take it all the way. Scout and Armored both. I think they are the best units. That's why I did the review video on them first. If you haven't seen it, please go check it out. This is the next best unit. The way this modifies our infantry is phenomenal. So one thing I want to take a moment to talk about here in case you're interested. So I have these clear movement trays from Squad Marks. So this is a product that I really like. I highly recommend it. I really do love them. And Squad Marks has been kind enough to offer a 10% discount to any of you all who use the link in my video description below or on any of my other profiles where I place the link to this discount. So click on that and use the discount code Cadian Sergeant. Use Cadian Sergeant to get your discount and get 10% off your clear resin bases today. These are magnetic. My models just clip to them real nice and easy, and then I can move my units around with ease across the battlefield and don't have to worry about taking a ton of time moving individual models as I advance forward, taking the battlefield in the name of the Emperor. So please definitely check these out. It's a product I really love, and honestly, then your models look great while they're on the battlefield. So you win-win. Just do it. Save time, look great, and win the battle quicker. So check out the link below. So what we have to finish this off is the Regimental Attaches. Now I wanted to add these in here because I really, really love this unit. And this is why. Profile-wise, absolutely nothing special. They are movement 6, toughness 3, 5-up save, 1 wound apiece. They die pretty quickly. Leadership 7, OC 1. Nothing special. But you have to attach them. You have to attach them to a Cadian command or to a command squad. Not a Cadian one, but here I have a Cadian one. So these have to attach to a command squad. If you do not have a command squad for them to attach to, they're considered destroyed when the battle begins. So you have no other option. You can't run them independently. They have to attach to the command squad. That's fine. That's just more bodies in this unit with a 6-up feel no pain and +1 to the objective control. Can't complain about that. So each one of these, their weapons are nothing to think about, hardly. That's the other thing I just want to point out. So they have las pistols, close combat weapons, and then the Astra path has a stave that hits on 4s at strength 6, -1, D3 damage. So maybe if you get into combat, it only has 1 attack, right? So you might have a chance of dealing a few wounds to something. That's not why you take any of these models. Why you take these models is for their unit abilities. What makes them special and custom? First thing I have a custom Master of Ordnance here that I've made. And this is from the Nexus model from Genestealer Cult. I actually don't have the original Master of Ordnance, so I just have this custom one I kit bashed here this past year, and I really love it. So what you get here is called Artillery Commander. At the start of your shooting phase, select one enemy unit within 30 inches of and visible to this unit's Master of Ordnance model that has not already been selected for this ability, because you could have multiple of these. Until the end of the phase, blast weapons equipped by friendly Astra Militarum artillery models have sustained hits 1 when targeting that unit. So now your basilisks, your wyverns, your manticores, your field ordnance batteries all get sustained hits 1. This also applies to a few other quirky models from the Forge World line, so just keep that in mind and check those out to see which ones have the artillery keyword. And it's some of them that you might be surprised by, like the Rapier Laser Destroyer is, oh, but it's not a blast weapon, so that wouldn't count. But just check those keywords and check the blast on the weapon profiles to see if it would count. So that is really awesome, getting you those extra hits. Now, the other thing is to keep in mind about that. Sustained hits 1 in artillery, typically we don't move our artillery. So that means you're getting a lethal hit plus an extra hit that you then get to roll for. Really great, and can help out to really deal some damage to your opponent. Next, we have the Aeronautica Commander. So this is our Master of the Fleet. In this ability, at the start of your shooting phase, select one enemy unit within 30 inches invisible to this unit's Officer of the Fleet. Until the end of that phase, each time a friendly Astra Militarum aircraft, that's it, aircraft model, makes a ranged attack that targets that unit, add 1 to the hit roll. So, you're bringing in Valkyries, you're bringing in Thunderbolts, and you're shooting with this guy. Or this guy can see the unit being shot at. You select that unit, now your Thunderbolt, your Valkyrie, your Vendetta, your whatever else is hitting on 3s now. You're hitting on 3s. Then if you use Daring Recon from your Scout Sentinels, you're hitting on 3s, rerolling 1 with your aircraft. That makes the guard aircraft much deadlier than your opponent is anticipating. And the other thing is too, because this is attached to your Cadian command squad and potentially attached to like a 20-man unit of Cadian shock troops, it's going to be a few turns before they get to your Officer of the Fleet and your Master of the Ordnance and your Astropath. So keep that in mind. This guy will actually stick around for a little while and be able to give you those buffs to be able to take down your opponent with your aircraft. I love it. This is why I love taking my Thunderbolt with this guy in the range. Come in there, point at it, and say, do a gun run on that enemy unit. Take them out. Last, we have the Astropath, and this has the Divination Psychic ability. So enemy units that are set up on the battlefield as reinforcements cannot be set up within 12 inches of this Astropath model. So it's not the unit, not the unit it's attached to or the unit that's attached to, just this one model. So what you can do early game is take your Astropath, tuck them to the back a little bit, maybe even to the front, and deny a deep strike zone. Because remember, these are a leader unit and they're attached, and your opponent doesn't have precision. There's no reason for you to not put these models literally in the front of your line. Put them up front, deny that deep strike into the middle of the board, and laugh as the Chaos Space Marine Terminators can't come in where they wanted to, all because of one little guy and a set of robes. It's a pretty good ability. If you're playing more conservative and you're in your backfield, you can do the same thing and basically keep this guy near the corner and block out the entire back corner of your backfield and push up front to the objectives. So that can be really critical, while maybe your command units support your artillery in that backfield as well. So that's all 3 units here. Now, what do I really recommend for their tactics and their strategy? How I've been running these is honestly putting them with 20-man units. So I know a lot of people aren't in favor of 20-man units right now. I'll cover that in a later video when I actually talk about infantry squads, but I think that's the way to go, because if I'm going to spend points on these characters, I want to keep them alive. They're going to help keep my infantry squads alive, and the more bodies in my infantry squad, the more likely these guys will stick around to give buffs, to be able to get into the fight, to make a difference in my shooting, and also to be able to do cheeky things like fall back. and still shoot. Thank you, Castellan. I really think these create a lot of flexibility for you when you're on the table. And to be able to just right here, potentially, if you do the enhancement, 3 orders between these models, and you buff all your aircraft, and you buff your artillery, and you block out deep strikers, and you add OC, and you cancel out all modifiers. This is the best synergy bubble we have between a bunch of units. This isn't even the end of it either, because we haven't even talked about the bodyguards, the Ogre bodyguards that you can also add into your command squads. I will cover that in a separate video. But for now, this is what I do recommend for your Cadian shock troops, is if you're going to run big 20-man squads, run it this way and add these in. Now, if you don't want to run 20-man squads, you may actually want to consider breaking these up a little bit. Maybe the command squads with a 10-man unit, and the Castellans with a different 10-man unit, and so forth. It just depends on your build and how you want to run it. I typically go combined arms, and so I like to do 2 20-man or 3 20-man blobs of infantry. And those will stick around for a while and allow me to move around. Then I can resurrect them with reinforcement stratagem, bring them back onto the table if they do die. Now, of course, that doesn't bring back these leaders, but maybe they've survived and they're hiding behind a wall or a building, and I can kind of salvage them out of that later on and have them continue to give out their buffs through orders or through the enhancements to other units or blocking deep strike. So that can really be helpful and really allow you to kind of push your line out too. Now, since you're attaching these to shock troops, that's the other thing to keep in mind. With the shock troops' ability to get sticky objectives, that means you control the objective even after you've moved off of it until your opponent secures it. That allows you to move around the board with these units and to be able to do their buffs and their orders and their blocking and everything else, and maybe not have to worry so much about your backfield objectives. Then, if you're able to screen out, and these are at least, say, about 6 inches away from the objectives they formerly held, and there's something behind that, then screening out enemy units deep striking in, that means also, even if your opponent charges this unit with their 20-man infantry squad, and they take them all out, they won't be able to consolidate back onto the objective, and you'll hold it for another turn. So this can also allow for you to screen really well with your shock troops. So that's just something to keep in mind with a strategy, because these will buff them, make them more resilient. If your opponent does have something to rip right through it, then everything combined, you're able to still hold that objective and keep your opponent away from it, which is really awesome. Don't also discount the Cadian Castellan and melee. It can actually do some damage, and so can your command squads. They do more attacks with their chainswords than you think they would do. So you can actually deal out a little bit of damage to your opponent with these models. The other thing I might recommend for this is to probably not put these into reserves. And that is because, especially if you're doing what I'm doing and you're trying to give grand strategists and give lots of orders and to be able to have that synergy, that means you're not going to be able to do any of that until turn 3. That would be a complete waste of these models and not how you want to run them. So I do not recommend putting these, in the way I'm talking about running them, into strategic reserves. Try to have them on the table, hide them somewhere behind terrain, or push them up front, and hopefully they can survive the firepower of your opponent, and have them doing their job, getting the table secured and advancing your army forward. So overall, I think these are A+ units. I would highly recommend taking them if you're running Cadians. Now, you don't have to run Cadians, because Death Korps Krieg and even Catachans, they're all viable options for your army. But if you are thinking Cadians, definitely bring these. Definitely try them out with larger units or even 10-man units, and just see what you think about how synergistic they can be for your army. I have had tons of fun with them. I usually actually run 2 Castellans and 2 command squads. That's how much I like these units and how much I think they add back to the games when I play them. You can see a lot of those on Slider Games Battle Reports, which are also linked here on my YouTube channel, and a playlist down below. So go check those out, please, and see how this all performs. All right, that's all I have for you today. So definitely check these out. Think about using these in your games and pairing these up with Thunderbolts or Basilisks and Manticores, 20-man infantry blocks, or even just Kazarkin for this guy. and seeing what kind of fun you can have with it, and see what kind of damage you can deal out to your opponent with all the great modifiers or lack of modifiers that you get out of these units here. So, as always, have fun wargaming, and remember, Cadia stand.